Hey friends, it's Jill. I'm popping in here before today's episode because I want to share what I've been hearing from so many of you lately and what I'm doing about it. Things feel more complex, heavier, and there just feels like there's so much more to navigate than there used to be. And if that's you, I want you to know you are not imagining it because I'm hearing it across the board. I also want you to know that I just opened applications for something that I have been building for a while called the Next Era Leader. It is a small 8-week cohort for women who want to expand their leadership capacity and think more clearly in the middle of all of it. It's been on your mind, it's been on my mind, it's been on everyone's mind. And if this is you and it sounds interesting, the details are in the show notes. And for the fellas, you know I love you and we will have something for you too. I continue to work with you one-on-one, but this particular cohort is for the ladies. You can get all the information in the show notes or go to griffinmethod.com and you can also find everything there. I hope to see you on the inside. Hey there, I am Jill Griffin, the host of the Career Refresh, and this week I have a treat. I am here with Dina, Scippa, the founder of Enough Labs. She is a leadership coach to senior directors and VPs inside complex global organizations, and she joins us here today to break down the invisible patterns, which we all know are there, but we can't actually name them, that stall high performers right before they're about to get into that next level. So I am bringing her on to have a robust conversation. I know there's a lot here that you are going to want to take away. So get that notes app ready. If you're a pen and paper person, get that ready because Dina is going to be dropping some insights and things that you can implement this week. So let's dig in and welcome Dina to the show. Nice to have you here.
Thank you, Jill, so much. It's such an honor. I'm such a fan. I love having these types of conversations. So thank you.
Thank you. Why don't you start with giving everybody, you've got this amazing 20 plus year background. Why don't you give people a little bit more of your background so they can understand the excellence that is sitting with them today?
I so appreciate that. So about 20 years in international development work, specifically in the space of gender equality and women's empowerment. I was right in the mix of leading major USAID initiatives and USAID, US Agency for International Development. Yes. That agency.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Okay.
An incredible career doing, honestly, such incredibly important work that came to a screeching halt in January of 2025. I have worked with organizations across my career, helping communities, projects, stakeholder partners understand the invisible barriers that hold women and girls back, and also other marginalized groups.
Sure.
Now, taking that work, I really saw front and center with conversations with hundreds of women and girls around the world, understanding what I felt really is a leadership design problem, an issue with confidence. And I was seeing it in every sector, in every role. And I said, I have to do something about this because I consistently saw brilliant leaders getting stuck inside of a cycle of proving instead of deciding. And my work really focuses on how to communicate with clarity, with authority, with making decisions a little bit faster and building on those behaviors that move teams and businesses forward. Because really, we're in a moment where we need real, authentic leadership.
Yes.
Taking shape.
Yes, no doubt. Okay, so let's start to get a little bit tactical with it, right? So if you're working with leaders at a high level who are stuck, what does this actually look like from the inside? I want people to be like, oh, that's me, that's not me, and start to self-identify.
Yeah, and I've seen this so often in my clients and in the work that I'm doing with organizations. It looks like you're still the most reliable person in the room, but often the most overloaded. You're being pulled into how things get done instead of shaping what gets done. I think the telltale sign is when your calendar is full of doing and not deciding. It's the calendar that looks completely blocked in every single hour of every day, no breaks.
Right.
But
and double blocked, triple booked.
And then you have
Right.
to choose and dip into one and the
Right.
next.
It's the
And
mandatory meeting that you have to be in, but no one busy searched your calendar. So they're sort of like, that's on you. Got to figure out which one you're going to. Uh-huh.
absolutely. And perfect segue. You're praised as being so helpful and so responsive. Huge red flag. That's not leadership language. So I say to people, if your value and the way that you're relating to it is still tied to how much you produce, you're really operating below your level, even
Mm.
if your title says otherwise.
You are singing my song. This is
I
what I
know.
talk a lot about. And it's such a challenge because
Mhm.
what what we find is what got you here, what got you to that role is actually being that doer and that achiever and getting it done. But then at a certain point, if you don't figure out how to let go of what you were doing, it really make sure that you're nurturing your team or your peers or however your organization is set up so that they're doing different work, so that you're doing what you've actually gotten promoted for. You're now stuck in these two places where you're at capacity.
And
And,
that's a recipe for burnout.
and it's a recipe for burnout. Yep.
And see, I always found, and I saw this in my own leadership journey, it took me a while to get to that senior leadership role, and execution always gets rewarded early. And I say this a lot because it does get cycled into a lot of leaders who are women
Yeah,
who have had that type of behavior be
absolutely.
rewarded. But at senior levels, over execution becomes a liability.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you add in overfunctioning, again,
Yeah.
being at capacity, a high sense of responsibility. You're the person who is going to make sure we get it done because that's your brand. Your brand is like, I'm not going to leave crummy work, or I'm not going to leave my colleague, you know, struggling at 4 o'clock on a Friday and be like, peace out. You're not going to do that. So your brand and what makes you really likable, like you are well valued within the organization.
Yeah,
However, your influence is not there. So
absolutely.
this is where, you're talking about is like the strengths might be stalling. So let's name some of the strengths that are
Mhm.
now actually becoming the blind spot.
1,000%. I love this question. So, you becoming known for the one who handles it, I think shows up as someone who is deadline driven, who produces quality work, who is willing to put in those long hours to get it done when something has been thrown on your plate last minute. It really comes down to that proving energy. Let me show you how I can handle this. I'll just take that on. I'm a team player. I just want to make sure that we get this absolutely perfect before we share it. These are strengths, don't get me wrong, but at the same time they are absolutely holding you back from being positioned as the leader.
So
And
what do they do
oftentimes,
instead?
yeah, I mean, this is the question I'm constantly having with clients, and really it's so necessary. I would say, think about how you're positioning yourself as a leader. Instead of, let me show you how I can handle this, how about saying, here's how I see the decision that needs to be made? Or instead of, I'll take that on, recognize this is the risk that we need to account for and delegate it to someone else. Because oftentimes you're proving that you need to earn your seat when you've already been placed there.
Right.
You have to ask yourself if there's a practical shift instead of
Yeah.
jumping in to solve all the time, because let's be honest, there are a lot of high performing leaders out there who are just simply so uncomfortable with things being messy, things not
Yes.
being complete.
Right.
So ask yourself what decision needs to be made here? And then how can you sort of course correct without taking it on?
Right.
Because leaders hold the room when a decision needs to be made. They don't have to jump in and solve. But I think the critical piece here is that oftentimes leaders think that it's a negative reflection on them as a leader, as an individual, if something isn't done to their standard.
hmm How do
Yeah.
you think structural and gender bias, and for our listeners, structural bias, I just mean there are certain structures that are visible and invisible within organizations, and we're both sitting in the U.S. right now, so we are talking slightly U.S. centric. Your own market may have slightly different ways in which structural biases show up, but they're everywhere. And then there's the obvious gender bias, where we often do. I mean, we've all heard the story. It maybe has even happened to us where we look at someone who tends to be the most junior or the most female representing person in the room, and we say like, hey, can you order lunch for the team, or can you get the coffee, or this place is a mess in here, can you straighten it up before the meeting? And then suddenly they're like, no, I'm the executive vice president, I just happen to have no wrinkles yet and a young face.
Exactly. I mean, there is a very invisible tax that every woman knows. And I know that we're talking in sort of in the US centric lens, but letting go of this belief of the one who always delivers can feel like losing your edge. And that has everything to do with some seminal research that really was the motivating factor for why I created Enough Labs. There is actual research that documents a confidence cliff, is what they call it. And the
Mhm.
cliff that girls fall over starting at age 9. So their confidence starts to peak truly at age 9. And from ages 10 to 13, that confidence drops by 30%. And then between the ages of 13 to 17, it actually drops another 60%. Now, of course, we can't account for all of these different nuances, but there was a seminal study that was put together on this. And that same conditioning that starts where we are looking for belonging, looking for acceptance, looking to not be perceived as someone who is failing, who's not doing well, who can't be relied on, who isn't seen as collaborative. All of these messaging, all of these messages that start early frame our conditioning, and girls learn early to be liked and helpful,
Yeah.
even before they're ever taught to lead or
Yes.
shown
Yes.
these leadership qualities that are so essential. And so I offer this theory that I think the confidence cliff that's happening in adolescence for young girls is actually following us right into the workplace.
Or a
And
new level of it, right?
a
Kind
new
of
level
going
of
through
it, sure.
various cycles, or if you're on a return ship, if you're more
Right.
seasoned or a more experienced worker, it's happening
Mhm.
to you again,
Of
right? That
course.
idea. Hmm.
Yeah. So the gender barriers, I think, are impossible to ignore. They
Sure.
need to be called out. But I also think it's so incredibly difficult to try to shoulder that alone, which is why I think conversations like this really do need to be brought into the workplace. Because I can honestly tell you that even in doing 360 leadership assessments with leaders, the way that men have related to these topics is totally different than how women relate to the topics. It's
Oh,
like
yeah.
this invisible conversation. And I'm like, we don't even know what each other is holding and handling.
I want to tell you something that I saw
Yeah.
really funny. So this morning I was, doing my scroll across
Mhm.
LinkedIn, and it was a clip of Taylor Swift when she was, I'm gonna say 15 to 17 years old, and
Okay.
she's being interviewed off camera. It's a male voice, definitely Nashville-based music industry, and he says to her in sort of admiration, like, "Oh, you play both a 6 string and a 12 string guitar?" And her answer is basically like, "Well, my instructor told me I couldn't because my hands were too small, so I decided to go learn how to do it." So again,
I love
not
that.
asking for it permission, just decides I'm going to go prove you wrong. And then, my friends, the comments all saying it's not really that hard to play a 12 string guitar. No, no, no. Hold on, people. She's being interviewed between 15 and 17 years old, telling you about when she was 10 years old as a female that would have statistically a much smaller hand at 10 years old. So what we had in that exact, again, structural and gender bias, we had a situation in which mature individuals are looking at that, who are, I'm gonna guess, over 30, maybe in their 40s, going, it's not that hard to play a 12 string guitar. Okay. She's 10.
And I love how Taylor Swift in that moment didn't feel the need to over
No,
explain. She
she's
just
just like, you
actually
told me I
acknowledged how,
couldn't.
and
I
I did it.
decided to jump in.
And that's a perfect example of executive language patterns that I don't
Yes.
think women give themselves permission to do enough. Shorter sentences, fewer qualifiers, more direction, less explanation. But I love that example. And I think that when we think of our leadership, just as that incredible anecdote about Taylor Swift, is that you need to get anchored as a leader to really get clear, why am I sharing the perspective or the decision in this moment that I am?
Mhm.
Am I doing it for me because I know it's the right move, or am I trying to gain likability in this moment from peers? And I know that there's nuance and a ton of, range in terms of situations and circumstances. However, you really have to ask yourself, if you're moving through your workplace or through your team looking to get liked by for your decision making, it's going to be a huge drawback. It's going to
Right.
it's going to set you back, and it's really not going to let you move to that next level.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Which is also making me think about Kate Mann's work, Down Girl, where she talks
Hmm.
about the difference between
Oh
the human
yes.
giver um, and the human being. And I I've actually done my own IP off of that, and that it's the human doer, right? So you are the human giver or the human doer, and they both lead to burnout. There's
Brilliant.
in both of them, there's absolutely burnout. But this idea that very often gender normative women are appreciated for being likable and amenable and just get it done and smile and do it.
Yeah.
And like, great, if that's your brand and you want to do all that, awesome. But doing it because it's performative or because you think you have to is what we're talking about. We're not telling anybody to not be who they are. We're telling you to think, is that who you are? Or is it who you've been suggested you should be? And I
Yeah.
think that's the difference. I want to go back to
Absolutely.
something you said earlier around, you know, the strategic thinking part of the challenge versus the delivering, because
Yeah.
I don't want people to walk away with, wait, so I'm not going to deliver. Now I'm in trouble. Now
Right.
I'm failing. So
Right.
unpack that a little bit more for.
Yeah, I love it because I think there's a critical difference between strategic level thinking, positioning versus execution and delivery.
Mhm.
So, the best way I can sort of answer this question is perhaps with an anecdote of a former
Please.
client. Yeah. So, was working with a senior VP. She'd been with the company for over 15 years and had excelled into echelons of senior leadership because she was able to deliver at high levels. She had recently hired someone who had done a role for a client, who was a government contractor, for a role that she had already done 10, 15 years ago. But the person wasn't performing
Mm.
at the level that they needed to. And she said to me verbatim, it's just easier if I take on their work.
Oh, yeah.
They're struggling. There's no way. It's just faster for me to do it. I value the relationship that we have with the client. Things are really touchy right now. I'm just going to take it on. But her taking it on meant doing her executive VP role from 8 to 6,
Yeah.
ostensibly, and then going home,
Mhm.
being with her family, feeding kids, putting them to bed. And then the second shift began
Sure.
from 8 to midnight
Right.
and
To do the
taking
other
on
work.
extra work.
Mhm.
So I use this example and I reference it often because there's this mentality that in order to get it done, that you have to do it and that there's just no one else that can do it. And that assumption, that knee-jerk reaction to always do it, sort of trains and conditions the people around you to
Well,
say
it becomes a learned
it becomes a
helplessness,
learned
right?
behavior. Yes, absolutely.
Or, you know what, I only have to really do this work 65% because Jill's going to clean it up.
Yeah.
Jill's going to bring it from okay to excellent. And
Yeah.
then, you know,
And I don't really need to
right.
challenge myself to really build those. And I think it actually has huge repercussions in any workplace because
Sure.
you're really not cultivating a leadership pipeline. You're not helping people develop agency and accountability and build their skill set because they know that there's sort of a panic button.
Right.
Or you're also conditioning people to feel like nothing that they ever do is really that is good enough. And so it really creates this tension, whether it's visible or invisible, to say, well, I'm just going to do it to the best ability that I really know I want to in this
Mhm.
moment, because you're just going to go in and do it in the way that you want to. And it just creates some friction in the team. It creates
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think also in our current economic environment with our level of unemployment, what's happening very often is wisdom has left the building
A thousand
because
percent.
traditionally they're more expensive. And if you need to make cuts quick, we're going to cut someone, yes, ageism, but we're going to cut someone. Ageism starts at age 43 now. That's what the data is showing us.
Oh,
London School of Economics did a study in the last couple of years and saying that it's for profound starting at age 43. And then you add that on to maybe being more expensive. So it's easier to cut that. And when you think about this scenario, so if I'm over functioning and therefore doing more than my job and bleeding into the person on my team that should be doing their job, but now because I'm more expensive, I need to make cuts, that's now been cut. Now we have the junior staff stretching up. And look, that's what happens, right? They need to stretch into those roles. But if we haven't created a leadership pipeline and as an organization, we're not thinking through the impact of what we're doing to our leaders and the pressures that we're putting on them, then all of a sudden we have the next cohort of people who are like, you're up, and they are executionally strong, but they're not strategically strong. And here we go again. And that's what
absolutely.
continues to happen. Yes, I see it in the work I do, both at the corporate level and individual. I see it all the time.
Yeah. I mean, you and I are just speaking each other's language. So clear. But it's affirming. It's affirming to see that, obviously we're operating in different spaces and have different clients. And it's a pattern that I frankly, it keeps me up at night, Jill, to think about what is this next generation of leaders being prepared for, being positioned for, because and just to that same point about the LSE research, which is fascinating, it's this idea of senior leaders holding on to so much too, because that energy of over functioning sometimes comes through from a lens of, I want to make sure I stay relevant so I don't.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. Because what COVID taught us is we don't need a hall monitor anymore. Right. We don't need someone who's just checking on everyone. Right. We need someone. And this is a conversation I've been having in my working with Meta, conversation I've been having there, in which many ICs, independent contributors, and when we also think about leaders, right, many leaders also have to be ICs. There's a part of their work that I don't care, even if you are leading, you have to pause, think strategically. What's the vision? What's the mission? How are you doing this? And then you need to delegate. But if you're not able to think strategically for yourself first and map out what needs to get done, again, 1 for you, 2 for the others that you're influencing. Again, this is where, when we're in this type of environment where they're making cuts, I beg companies to not cut the professional development, because it's sure, you could read a book or two, but unless you're actually there in working with teams and doing dynamic work and understanding how it impacts the entire organization because the decisions we're making, you don't really understand that you have a rock star team potentially, but they're not realizing that potential because of the lack of leadership development. And again, when the strength becomes the blind spot in this. Okay, so there was a couple other things you said. You mentioned before about talking about shifting from proving to positioning. And this is one that can make me itch on the inside. So tell our listeners, tell them what that looks like, and then tell them how to fix it.
So I really feel like this is the identity shift. This is the real work. Letting go of being that one who always delivers, because that really is simply code for proving. And letting go of that can feel like you're losing your edge, like I said. But your next level doesn't require more effort. It requires a different identity. You have to name the fear. You have to say, you have to call yourself out on the fact that if I don't do it, will it fall apart? Because that's really the fear that's leading you. If I speak more directly, will I be seen as too much? These are the fears that are oftentimes sort of aligned with that fact that we've had all of this competence for so many years. So calling it out, it really does require, where am I so uncomfortable to let others lead in this moment, to carry something forward? And I think too, really anchoring into what you just named a couple of seconds ago, you have to give yourself the space to be devoted to more of that strategic thinking so that you can articulate a vision clearly so that people can actually go forth and carry it through. And when you don't do that, people are left in a swirl within your team. They're not clear where you want things to go. They're constantly double checking, triple checking with you. Is this what you meant? Or no, did I misunderstand it? So I think that really calling out that shift to move away from the knee-jerk reaction to need to prove or to fix or to solve, and really start, I hate to be so cliche with this as a coach, but really lean into the curiosity. What's happening in your team? Where are they able to elevate answers and solutions? And then where can you provide guidance where it's necessary, instead of feeling like you need to carry it yourself? I think this is where the identity shift that moves away from doer that got you here to this leadership role, and shifting into overseeing, really providing that level of technical oversight that you were hired for. And this might make some folks uncomfortable who are listening. But I know it for a fact that when I stepped into my very first senior leadership role, I was overseeing a team of over 15 people, multiple time zones, completely remote. There was almost like a grieving, Jill, a grieving that was associated with, I'm not the one doing the work anymore. I'm managing. I'm leading.
I don't necessarily know where I'm leading yet, because I'm still waiting to understand the job that I'm in to know how to lead. Yeah.
And really, I think there's such a sense of worthiness in being able to be the
useful.
doer. The
The executor.
useful.
I'm useful. I'm the executor. And
And
there's
I
a
can
safety in
see
that too.
there is
Because now I
and
can
you named it.
physically show you what work I produced. This is what
Yeah.
I did today, right? I mean,
And
I come up from a strategy lens. That's where I spent the bulk of my career
okay.
last almost 10 years now as a coach full time, but prior to that as strategy. And when I got more and more senior in strategy, there were days where I would literally be in a little bit of a panic, like, uh-oh, what if someone asked me what I did today? I don't have anything tangible to show you. Now, you could check my browser history and see the 86 research surveys that I read, and you could see my scraps of notes of pulling together thoughts and things and how that might impact the strategy that we're working on. But I couldn't show you anything. And that was a real nervous system regulation where no, and catch me in the hallway or near the water fountain and I'm going to tell you what I did today, but I may not have something tangible to show you. And that was a bit step change of
It's a huge
understanding
shift.
leadership.
It's a huge shift because you have associated your success, your usefulness, your worthiness in your role with your output.
Mhm.
That's what got you there. And I think the shift, I had to learn this. I work with my clients all the time about this very fact, is that allow yourself to be recognized in what got you here and provide that level of expertise and insight because that's what you were actually hired for. But
Yes.
there's a safety in going, I don't mean to say this, but going backwards to what was comfortable and what was known and what was celebrated and rewarded, as opposed to really leaning into this sort of next level leadership identity.
Mm,
Yeah.
okay. I love that.
Because
All
it's the
right.
first time that they've been there, or maybe the second.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
All right. So you also mentioned leadership communication and like I call it like precision
Yeah.
communication. Give an example, if you could, of what it's not and what it is. Maybe like the same example. Here's how you wouldn't say it, and here's how you would
Yeah.
say it.
Yeah. I love this. I think about this a lot in terms of our communication styles. And there's a certain way that we communicate that signals readiness, that
Mhm.
signals, grounded authority. And a lot of times I will work with my leadership clients who tend to be women often, to move away from just checking to rather saying, here's my perspective. I think maybe, perhaps what I'm seeing is I I cannot
There's like
tell
a
you.
caginess that I'm
There's a
sensing.
key. There's a
Like we're again going back to gender and structural bias. When I'm direct, I'm the B word. I'm
Of
difficult.
course.
I'm hard.
Yeah.
So how do we, one, regardless of our gender, understand that that's a prevalent thing that's going on and
It
actually
is.
really listening that are they being the B word or are they just being direct?
Yeah. And well, I think directness has been sort of hijacked as being a dirty word.
Aggressive, right?
Aggressive.
Right. It
Right.
becomes
Yeah,
the A word.
difficult.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think communication styles that you can see have shorter sentences,
Hmm.
fewer qualifiers,
Hmm.
more direction,
Yep.
allow people to get clear really quickly
Yep.
where you stand. So I always say this, that executive presence isn't about confidence. It's actually about clarity under pressure. I always tell people, if your listeners take anything away from today's episode, take the question, does that make sense? Completely out of your head.
Oh,
Drop it entirely. And especially for any women listening, drop
does that
that
make sense?
entirely.
It,
Like
it
you
almost,
just
I think, becomes a conversation filler that you don't know how to put the visual period on what you just
hard.
said. So it
Yes.
becomes a conversation filler. So what should they say instead as they're, again, working on their ability to have that precision conversation?
Well, I think be confident in your ability to communicate ideas precisely and be okay with the silence. Because I think whenever anyone asks, does that make sense? You've likely said
You're putting
something
it
that
back on yourself that you didn't explain it well. Okay, so let me
exactly.
ask you this then. What if I'm a leader and I'm not just speaking, but I'm giving a how to or an informational
Right.
discussion to my peers.
Love it.
And I want to make sure it makes sense, but I still think that's super weak language. What would you
Yes.
suggest I say
Yeah.
instead if I'm checking for feedback and trying to read the room?
Checking for feedback is absolutely a great leadership strategy. And I would say to a leader, asking the audience not to say, does it make sense? Because it puts people on edge. No one's going to say, no, it didn't make sense. You could kind of lean on a bit of a Socratic method. Say you're in a virtual call, you could call on someone to say, hey, I know this work is going to impact you directly. So I just want to make sure, what did you hear?
So what did you hear? That's a good phrase, people. Get that down. What did you hear? Um, I think I've also at times said things like blah, 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 thoughts, opinions, objections,
Mhm.
and just again owning it and saying like you might have a thought, opinion, or objection. Let's
And
roll.
feel free to
Yeah.
bring that forward. I think the more you normalize those types of spaces for dialogue, that people are actually getting more primed, as opposed to, okay, here's another meeting where I'm just listening to Jill because she's just going to talk at us.
Talk.
I
Right.
think
Versus
we need to create
engagement.
space for that two-sided communication.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
was joking with a former colleague this
Yeah.
morning about our CEO, and I just remember one time someone just kept saying, I think that, well, I think that, and she like lost it and she was like, I don't give a bleep, 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 bleep what you think. I want to know what you bleep and believe. And everyone was like,
Whew.
okay.
But if you think about
But
it,
you know
I mean,
what? It was, I mean, it's what, 15 plus years later, and I'm still like, you know what? She's right. I don't care
it's
what
a
you,
mic drop moment. It's a mic drop
I
moment.
want to know
But
what you believe. And if you're picking up what we're laying down, there's a difference in
Mhm.
that energy. Because I think is a little bit like, I'm verbally processing, I'm working this out loud,
Mhm.
which is fine in
Yeah.
certain areas and certain circles, maybe not for the boardroom.
Yeah. But Jill, one thing just to call out right here, anyone who's using language that says, I think, or maybe this could be, is actually hedging their bets in
Totally.
that very moment. They're afraid of being rejected in that moment, which
Yep.
is a very human experience.
Yes.
I get it. But the more that you sort of hide behind that language, you're not, I mean, let's call it what it is. It's exposure therapy. When you can actually
Yep.
say, here's what I'm seeing.
Yep.
Here's my perspective. And let's just see where that
And let's
lands.
see where it
Instead
goes.
of,
Yeah.
if I just say to folks, I think maybe, then I won't be called out for being wrong because I was only
Because you were
50%
soft in
sure.
it. It wasn't that hard on it. I just said, I think. Yeah. I would say, for listeners, without sounding weird, maybe those are that's language you can practice with safer circles, friends, family, and just minor ways where you're not going to turn your friendship conversation into a business conversation,
Right.
but just watch. Even it's even good to watch your uhs, right? It's speech language and the fillers that we use that also impacts how we're communicating.
Absolutely.
It's hard work. I have a dear friend who's a PhD in speech rhetoric, and this is what one of the things that she teaches is really how to find the anchor words that work for you versus like filler words.
Amazing.
Um, and again, opportunity to be practicing in safer circles. All right. So as we start to close, what are 2 to 3 things that
Mm.
you would suggest somebody does after listening to this episode or watching us?
Yeah. I mean, I would say start to take inventory of your language. How often, if you can have a notepad by your desk and kind of take stock of how many times you are softening your position, how much you're hesitating, maybe you're trying not to be perceived as difficult.
Mhm.
I would say take stock of that and really start to ask yourself, why was I doing it in that moment? Because we're all super busy. So I
Mhm.
would say that's a really an easy lift. And I would say perhaps maybe this week, maybe the next month, the next time something seems to have fallen off a team's radar, or that it needs to get done and you think that you're the only one in the room to fix it. Challenge yourself to figure out who else could
Mm.
take up the mantle in that moment. You are a leader for a reason, and you are being looked at, regarded, hailed as the one with the vision, the one who's driving the team. And so if you can resist that urge to have to fix and problem solve right in that moment and start to ask questions around the room,
Mhm.
because likely the solution is in that room, and call someone forward to be inspired to maybe take on a little bit more of a leadership role themselves.
Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah.
And we are going to end on that. Friends, thank you so much for listening to us today. And we're going to thank Dina. If you have questions for me or Dina, send us an email at hello@jillgriffincoaching.com. We will get the questions to Dina. We will bring her back. I'm already saying that we're going to bring her back.
I would be
Because I feel
honored.
like
I'd
she
love
would
it.
come back and talk to us
Oh,
again.
absolutely.
And again, try some of these ideas that she is suggesting. Really watch your language and really think about who you're being. And is that serving you? Is that playing to your blind spot? And how do you really want to think about delegation? Coach your people. Don't tell them every single thing they need to do. Have an amazing week. Be intentional and always, always, always be kind. We'll see you soon. I'm Jill Griffin, your host of the Career Refresh Podcast. My mission is to make workplaces more successful for everyone. So if you have ideas for topics or future guests, please email us at hello@jillgriffincoaching.com. Until next time, embrace possibility, be generous, intentional, and kind.